The halls of Galactic Union Academy buzzed with excitement as students from across the cosmos prepared for the most anticipated event of the semester. Banners featuring various alien creatures floated gracefully through the anti-gravity corridors, while holographic displays showcased exotic pets from 1,000 different worlds. But among all the chatter and preparations, one particular announcement had caused quite a stir. For the first time in the Academy's history, a human student would be participating in the annual Bring Your Pet to School Day. I watched from my locker as my best friend Alex walked through the entrance, carrying what looked like a perfectly ordinary transport container. The other students, some with tentacles, others with multiple eyes, and a few who were basically sentient crystals, kept their distance. They'd all heard the stories about Earth, classified as a death world by the Galactic Union. A planet where even the smallest creatures could be deadly predators. "Hey, ZYX!" Alex called out, waving at me with their free hand. My bioluminescent spots flickered in response, a typical greeting from my species. As Alex's designated cultural exchange partner, I'd spent the past year learning about Earth and its inhabitants. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. "Did you really bring one of those?" I asked, my translator struggling to convey the mix of curiosity and apprehension in my voice. The container in Alex's hands shifted slightly, and a soft sound emerged from within, something between a chirp and a purr. "Yep. Meet Captain Whiskers," Alex said proudly, setting the container down. "She's been with me since I was 10. Don't worry, she's totally harmless. Most of the time." That last part was said with a grin that made my secondary heart skip a beat. The Academy's main hall was already filling up with students and their companions. There were floating gas beings with their pet energy wisps, silicon-based life forms with crystalline constructs that sang in frequencies beyond normal hearing, and even a Zentorian with their famous color-changing mood moss. But as Alex prepared to reveal their pet, a small crowd began to gather at a safe distance. Professor Nix 427, our xenobiology teacher, hovered nearby with all 4 of their sensor arrays focused intently on the container. "Now, Student Alex," they began, their voice resonating through their universal translator, "I must remind you that all Earth-based life forms must adhere to Safety Protocol 7B9. We wouldn't want a repeat of the infamous hamster incident from last cycle." I shuddered at the memory. Who knew such a tiny creature could cause so much chaos in the zero-gravity chamber? But Alex just nodded confidently, already keying in the security code to open the container. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet a species that's been living alongside humans for thousands of years," Alex announced. "They've helped us hunt, protected our homes, and even saved lives. In fact, they were one of the first animals we ever domesticated." The container's door slid open with a soft hiss. The assembled crowd collectively held their breath, those who had breath to hold, anyway. Even the Academy's security drones drifted closer, their sensors primed for any sign of danger. A graceful creature emerged, stretching luxuriously and revealing sharp claws that gleamed under the Academy's artificial lighting. Its fur was a mix of orange and white, and its eyes, seemingly glowing with intelligence, surveyed the room with regal indifference. A long tail swished back and forth as it sat down and began to groom itself, completely unbothered by the array of alien life forms watching in fascination. That's a feline." Professor Nix 427's translator crackled with excitement. "I've only seen them in historical documents about Earth's apex predators." "Actually," Alex corrected gently, reaching down to scratch behind Captain Whisker's ears, eliciting a loud purr that made several crystalline students vibrate in resonance, "she's just a regular house cat." "Well, technically a rescue cat, but same difference." The purring grew louder as Captain Whiskers rubbed against Alex's legs, and I noticed something fascinating. The students closest to us were no longer backing away. Instead, they were leaning forward, their various sensory organs fixed on this supposedly deadly Earth predator that was now rolling onto its back, paws in the air, looking about as threatening as a Venusian cloud puppy. But just as the tension began to ease, the Academy's automated feeding system malfunctioned. A container of premium Jovian mouse feed burst open near the ceiling, sending thousands of nutrient pellets raining down through the hall's artificial gravity field. Captain Whisker's head snapped up, pupils dilating to perfect black circles. In that moment, everyone remembered why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its creatures, even the domesticated ones, commanded such respect across the galaxy. What happened next would go down in Academy history, though whether as a disaster or a triumph remained to be seen. As Captain Whiskers crouched, muscles tensing under that innocent-looking fur, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was what Alex had planned all along. After all, there's nothing quite like a practical demonstration to teach the galaxy about humanity's oldest companions, and why even our pets can be both the most charming and the most terrifying creatures in the known universe. Time seemed to slow down as Captain Whiskers launched herself into the air. The gathered aliens watched in stunned silence as this supposedly domesticated Earth predator demonstrated exactly why cats were once worshipped as gods on their home planet. Her movements were pure liquid grace, defying both gravity and expectations as she twisted through the shower of falling pellets. "Oh no," Alex muttered, but I caught the slight smile tugging at their lips. "She's showing off." Several security drones moved to intercept, but they might as well have been standing still. Captain Whiskers bounced off one drone, used another as a springboard, and somehow managed to catch 3 pellets in mid-air before landing perfectly on a floating display shelf. The shelf's anti-grav stabilizers whirred in protest, adjusting to her weight as she delicately ate her prizes. Professor Nick's 427 sensor arrays were spinning so fast they began to blur. Remarkable. Simply remarkable. The speed, the precision, the calculated use of environmental features as launch points. And all this from what humans consider a house pet. I noticed Alex's chest puffing up with pride. We humans had been trying to explain to the Galactic Union for years that Earth's death world classification was overly dramatic. Sure, our planet had some challenging features, but it had also produced beings of incredible adaptability and grace like Captain Whiskers, who was now giving herself a casual bath as if she hadn't just performed impossible acrobatics in front of an interstellar audience. "Actually, Professor," Alex began, clearly warming up to their favorite topic, "cats have been living in human homes for over 10,000 years. They started out helping us control pests in our first agricultural settlements, but these days they're mostly companions. Though some still hunt mice and..." A high-pitched squeal interrupted Alex's impromptu history lesson. One of the Jovian pellets had rolled near a group of first-year Methelians, gaseous beings who communicated through controlled chemical reactions. Their agitation caused them to release warning pheromones, which in turn triggered their pet quantum bubbles to start vibrating at an alarming frequency. Captain Whisker's ears perked up immediately. Her tail began to twitch in that way that all cat owners know means trouble is brewing. The quantum bubbles, sensing a predator's attention, started to bounce erratically around their owners, creating a chain reaction of chaos across the hall. "Everyone stay calm." Professor Nick's 427 attempted to restore order, but their translator was drowned out by the growing commotion. The quantum bubbles were now ricocheting off walls, leaving trails of sparkling energy in their wake. Captain Whisker's eyes darted back and forth, tracking their movement with laser-like focus. I felt my bioluminescent spots pulsing with anxiety. "Alex, maybe we should." But before I could finish, the Academy's automated defense system activated, interpreting the erratic energy signatures as a potential threat. Containment fields began sprouting up randomly throughout the hall, catching several students and their pets in shimmering bubbles of force. "Attention all students," the AI's calm voice echoed through the chamber. "Please remain stationary while we assess the situation. Any unauthorized movement may result in temporary containment." Alex rushed to Captain Whisker's perch, but the cat had already moved. She was weaving through the maze of containment fields with impossible precision, somehow predicting where each new barrier would appear seconds before it materialized. The quantum bubbles continued their frenzied dance, but now they seemed to be following a pattern, one that was leading them straight toward the hall's central gravitational control panel. "The containment fields are just making things worse," Alex shouted over the growing chaos. "The quantum bubbles are feeding off the energy." Professor Nix 427 extended their sensor arrays to full length, analyzing the situation. "Fascinating. The interaction between the bubble's quantum states and the containment fields is creating a cascading resonance effect. At this rate, we could experience a localized gravity reversal in approximately 3 minutes." I watched as more and more students were caught in containment fields, their pets either trapped with them or adding to the mayhem. A Plutonian shadow hound was howling in frequencies that made the crystalline students vibrate uncomfortably. A pair of Martian dust devils had broken free from their containment vessels and were forming miniature tornadoes in the corners of the hall. But through all this chaos, Captain Whiskers remained remarkably focused. She had positioned herself near the base of the gravitational control panel, her tail twitching with mathematical precision. The quantum bubbles were drawing closer, their erratic movements becoming more coordinated as if being subtly herded. "Alex," I said slowly, my translator struggling to convey the mix of fear and awe in my voice, "did you really bring Captain Whiskers just for a regular pet show and tell?" A knowing smile spread across Alex's face as they watched their cat work. "Let's just say humans aren't the only ones who've learned to adapt to life in space. Captain Whiskers here spent 3 years with me on the International Space Station before we came to the Academy. She's more than familiar with zero-gravity situations." The quantum bubbles were now completely focused on Captain Whiskers, their earlier panic forgotten as they bobbed and weaved in what almost looked like a playful dance. The cat's apparent hunting behavior had transformed into something else entirely. She was guiding them, using their own momentum and energy to create a stable pattern. "But how did you know?" I asked, watching as the containment fields began to power down, the defense AI apparently recalculating its threat assessment. "I didn't know exactly what would happen," Alex admitted, "but I did know that sometimes the best way to handle chaos is to introduce a little controlled unpredictability. That's something every cat owner learns pretty quickly." As the situation began to stabilize, I couldn't help but notice the changed expressions on my fellow students' faces. The fear and apprehension had been replaced by something else: curiosity, respect, and maybe even a hint of understanding. This was why humans and their pets had survived and thrived on their supposedly deadly world. It wasn't just about being the strongest or the most dangerous, it was about adaptation, cooperation, and knowing when to let chaos work in your favor. But just as things seemed to be calming down, the Academy's lights flickered ominously. The quantum bubbles, still moving in their cat-guided dance, had created an unexpected energy pattern. Captain Whiskers' ears suddenly flattened against her head, and I saw Alex's eyes widen in recognition of what that meant. "Everyone," they called out, "I think we might want to brace for." The lights went out completely, plunging the hall into darkness broken only by the glow of various bioluminescent students, myself included, and the increasingly bright quantum bubbles. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just going to be a regular bring your pet to school day, it was going to be a lesson about Earth, its inhabitants, and why sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room might also be your best chance at survival. In the darkness of the Academy Hall, Captain Whiskers' eyes glowed with an almost otherworldly intensity. The quantum bubbles pulsed in sync with her tail movements, creating patterns of light that danced across the walls like auroras. My bioluminescence, along with that of my fellow light-producing classmates, cast an eerie glow over the scene. "The main power grid is completely offline," Professor Nix 427 announced, their sensor arrays dimming to conserve energy. "The backup systems should have activated by now, but something's interfering with the startup sequence." Alex was surprisingly calm, watching Captain Whiskers with an expression I'd never seen before. "Professor, what happens when quantum bubbles interact with the Academy's artificial gravity system?" There was a moment of silence as all 4 of Professor Nix 427's sensor arrays focused on the increasingly complex dance taking place between the cat and the quantum bubbles. "Theoretically." Oh my. Everyone, grab onto something stable immediately. The warning came just in time. The artificial gravity began to fluctuate, creating waves of varying gravitational force that rippled through the hall. Students and pets alike started floating upward, only to be pulled back down moments later. The containment fields, still active in some areas, created pockets of normal gravity that only added to the chaos. The quantum bubbles have synchronized with the gravity control system's base frequency, the professor explained, their voice wavering as they anchored themselves to a nearby pillar. They're creating a cascading resonance effect that could potentially. A loud crack interrupted them as the first structural support beam began to strain under the irregular gravitational forces. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot, causing several of the more sensitive alien pets to emit distress signals in various frequencies. "We need to shut down the gravity system manually," Alex shouted over the growing cacophony. "But the control panel is behind that wall of quantum bubbles, and they're becoming more unstable by the second." I watched as Captain Whiskers maintained her position near the control panel, seemingly unaffected by the gravitational chaos around her. The quantum bubbles had formed a swirling vortex around her, their energy signatures growing more intense with each passing moment. "Why isn't she running away?" one of the crystalline students chimed, their structure vibrating with concern. "Surely even an Earth predator must feel fear." Alex managed a small laugh despite the situation. "Oh, she's definitely scared. But you see, there's something humans learned a long time ago about cats. They don't just hunt because they're predators. They hunt because they're guardians." As if to prove Alex's point, Captain Whiskers suddenly shifted her position, her movements precise despite the fluctuating gravity. The quantum bubbles responded to her presence, their chaotic dance becoming more ordered, more purposeful. "The readings are off the scale," Professor Nix 427 exclaimed, their sensor arrays spinning wildly. "The quantum energy is being channeled somehow, but the pattern. It's unlike anything in our database." A second support beam groaned ominously, and I felt my primary heart stop as I realized what was about to happen. The Academy's AI voice crackled through the remaining functional speakers, warning, structural integrity compromised. Emergency protocols initiated. Preparing for immediate evacuation. But evacuation wasn't an option. The quantum bubble vortex had grown too large, too powerful. We were trapped in a rapidly destabilizing gravity well with the house cat from Earth as our only hope for survival. "Alex," I called out, my bioluminescent spots flashing in distress, "please tell me this is part of the plan." "Not exactly," they admitted, gripping a floating desk to stay anchored. "But I do know one thing about cats that might help us. They're incredibly good at solving problems, especially when those problems involve physics and small moving objects." Captain Whisker's tail had stopped twitching. Her entire body was still, poised in that perfect moment of anticipation that anyone who's ever watched a cat hunt would recognize. The quantum bubbles swirled faster and faster around her, their light becoming almost blindingly bright. "The gravity fluctuations are reaching critical levels," Professor Nix 427 warned. "If we can't stabilize them in the next 60 seconds. They didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew what would happen if the artificial gravity system completely failed. The Academy's structural integrity was already compromised. A total gravity failure would tear the entire section apart. In that moment, Captain Whiskers turned her head slightly, meeting Alex's gaze. There was something in that look, a silent communication between human and cat that spoke of thousands of years of shared evolution and trust. "Everyone," Alex called out, their voice steady despite the chaos, "I need you to stop trying to fight the gravity changes. Let yourselves float. Trust me on this." The other students looked uncertain, but one by one they released their holds on various anchoring points. I hesitated for a moment before letting go of my own handhold, trying to ignore the terror in all four of my hearts. Captain Whiskers crouched lower, her muscles tensing. The quantum bubbles dance reached a fever pitch, their energy signatures merging into a single, pulsing field. The cat's eyes narrowed to slits, focused on something none of us could see. And then, just as the third support beam began to crack, Captain Whiskers pounced. Captain Whiskers launched herself into the heart of the quantum vortex with the kind of precision that would make a spacecraft navigator jealous. Time seemed to slow as she twisted through the air, her body moving in perfect harmony with the chaotic gravitational waves. The quantum bubbles responded to her presence, their erratic patterns shifting into something more organized, more purposeful. But just as it seemed like she might reach the control panel, the Academy's AI made an announcement that turned everyone's blood, or equivalent circulatory fluid, cold. Warning: detecting unauthorized access to primary reactor cooling systems. Containment protocols failing. Estimated time to critical overload, 3 minutes. That's impossible, Professor Nix 427's translator crackled with distress. The quantum disruption shouldn't be affecting the reactor systems. Unless someone planned for this to happen, Alex finished, their expression darkening. The pellet container didn't malfunction by accident, did it, Professor? The revelation hit me like a gravity wave. The chaos around us wasn't just a series of unfortunate events, it was orchestrated. Someone had used the Bring Your Pet to School Day as cover for something much more sinister. A new alarm began to sound, its pitch making several crystalline students vibrate uncomfortably. Through the quantum bubble vortex, I caught glimpses of emergency lights flashing in the corridor leading to the reactor core. The situation had just gone from bad to potentially catastrophic. We need to shut down both systems, Professor Nix 427 announced, their sensor arrays extending to maximum range. The gravity controls and the reactor cooling system are linked. If one fails completely, they didn't need to finish. We all knew that the Academy's artificial gravity was powered by the same reactor that kept the station's life support systems running. A complete failure would do more than just crush us, it would leave us exposed to the vacuum of space. Captain Whiskers, however, seemed to have her own ideas about the situation. Instead of continuing toward the gravity control panel, she suddenly changed direction mid-leap. Her path through the quantum bubble vortex created a wake of stable space, like a ship cutting through stormy waters. What is she doing? A floating Methelian student asked, their gaseous form rippling with confusion. Alex's eyes widened in recognition. She's not going for the controls anymore. She's tracking something. Or someone. Following Captain Whisker's gaze, I noticed a shadow moving along the edges of the hall, barely visible through the chaos of floating debris and pulsing quantum energy. The shadow was heading toward an emergency access panel, one that led directly to the reactor core. Of course, Professor Nix 427 exclaimed, their translator barely keeping up with their rapid chemical signals. A standard emergency shutdown wouldn't work if someone's already compromised the system. We need to prevent them from completing whatever they're trying to do. The quantum bubbles suddenly shifted their pattern, responding to Captain Whisker's change in focus. Instead of creating chaos, they began to form a complex three-dimensional grid throughout the space. The cat was using them like stepping stones, creating her own path through the fluctuating gravity field. Alex, I called out, my bioluminescent spots pulsing with urgency, your pet is either about to save us all or make things much, much worse. Welcome to life with cats, Alex replied with a grim smile. Sometimes you just have to trust their instincts, and hope they know what they're doing. The shadow by the access panel became more distinct as Captain Whisker's pursuit forced them into the light. To everyone's shock, it wasn't an intruder at all, it was one of the security drones. But its movements were all wrong, its typical smooth operations replaced by jerky, purposeful motions that suggested remote control. 2 minutes until critical reactor failure, the AI announced, its usually calm voice containing a note of genuine concern. The security drone reached for the access panel, its manipulator arms extending toward the emergency override controls. At the same time, another support beam gave way with a thunderous crack, sending shockwaves through the already unstable gravity field. Captain Whiskers was now positioned directly above the drone, her body coiled like a spring. The quantum bubbles had formed a perfect sphere around them both, creating a pocket of stable gravity in the midst of chaos. Her eyes glowed with predatory focus, but there was something else there too, a calculated intelligence that reminded everyone present that Earth's creatures weren't just survivors of a death world. They were its masters. The drone's manipulator arm was inches from the override when Captain Whiskers made her move. But none of us were prepared for what happened next. The quantum bubbles suddenly collapsed inward, focusing their energy into a single point. The cats first stood on end, crackling with accumulated quantum potential, and for a brief moment, she seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Professor Nick's 427 sensor arrays went completely still. "That's not possible," they whispered. "She's creating a localized quantum entanglement field." "But that would mean..." The drone froze mid-motion, caught in whatever impossible physics Captain Whiskers had just unleashed. Then, to everyone's horror, a new alarm began to sound, one that none of us had ever heard before. "Warning," the AI announced, its voice now carrying genuine urgency. "Detecting unprecedented quantum anomaly. Reactor containment field integrity at 15% and falling. Emergency protocols insufficient for current situation." Alex's confident expression finally cracked. "Okay," they admitted, watching their pet seemingly defy the laws of physics. This definitely wasn't part of the plan. The quantum anomaly pulsed outward from Captain Whiskers in waves of impossible light, each ripple bending space in ways that made my visual processors ache. The security drone was frozen in a state of quantum uncertainty, existing in multiple positions at once, like a three-dimensional echo of itself. 1 minute until critical reactor failure, the AI announced, its voice competing with the growing whine of failing containment fields. Alex pushed off from their floating position, using the debris around them to move closer to their pet. "Captain Whiskers," they called out, voice steady despite the chaos, "remember the space station?" "Just like we practiced." The cat's ears twitched at the sound of Alex's voice, but her focus remained locked on the drone. The quantum bubbles that had been swirling around the hall began to move with new purpose, forming complex geometric patterns that somehow mirrored the cat's own movements. Professor Nick's 427 sensor arrays were working overtime, trying to make sense of the readings. The quantum field. It's not just affecting the drone. It's creating a bridge between systems. The gravity controls, the reactor core, even the containment fields, they're all becoming quantumly entangled. "That's exactly what we need," Alex shouted over the growing roar of failing systems. "Captain Whiskers isn't just playing with the quantum bubbles, she's using them to reset everything back to its base state." Understanding dawned on me like a supernova. Cats on Earth were known for their ability to always land on their feet, to navigate through seemingly impossible spaces, to find their way home across vast distances. What if those weren't just physical abilities? What if cats had evolved to manipulate quantum probability itself? The drone's multiple states began to collapse into a single point as Captain Whiskers moved closer, her body moving with liquid grace through the quantum field she had created. Each step she took seemed to stabilize the space around her, forcing reality to conform to a more orderly state. 30 seconds to critical failure, the AI warned. But something was changing. The gravity waves that had been tearing the hull apart were smoothing out, falling into rhythm with Captain Whiskers' movements. The quantum bubbles pulsed in sync with her heartbeat, their energy feeding back into the Academy's systems in a controlled cascade. "The reactor containment fields are restabilizing," Professor Nick's 427 announced, their voice filled with disbelief. "Somehow, she's using quantum entanglement to force all systems back to their original configurations." The security drone finally collapsed into a single state, offline and harmless. As it clattered to the floor, its access panel popped open, revealing a small device that was definitely not part of its original programming. "Got you," Alex whispered, a grim smile of satisfaction crossing their face. Captain Whiskers sat down next to the disabled drone and began to groom herself, as if she hadn't just manipulated quantum mechanics to save the entire Academy. The remaining quantum bubbles settled into a gentle orbit around her, their energy signatures returning to normal levels. All systems restored to baseline, the AI announced, an unusual note of relief in its synthetic voice. Quantum anomaly contained. Emergency protocols deactivated. As the artificial gravity stabilized and students began settling back onto solid ground, Professor Nix 427 approached the fallen drone. This device. It's not just a hacking tool. It's a quantum scanner. Someone wasn't trying to destroy the Academy, they were trying to steal our quantum technology research data. Alex picked up Captain Whiskers, who started purring loudly enough to make nearby objects vibrate slightly. Well, I guess the secret's out now. Turns out Earth's gravity might be a bit higher than average, not just because of its mass, but because every cat on the planet is constantly making micro adjustments to quantum probability. The professor's sensor arrays spun in excitement. Are you saying that Earth's cats are natural quantum engineers? That they've been maintaining your planet's gravitational stability for thousands of years? Why do you think ancient Egyptians worshipped them? Alex replied with a wink. Though I have to admit, I didn't expect Captain Whiskers to put on quite such a dramatic demonstration. I was about to ask more questions when a soft chime echoed through the hall. The quantum bubbles, which had been quietly orbiting Captain Whiskers, suddenly perked up. To everyone's amazement, they began to play with the cat, bouncing off her paws and darting around her head like excited kittens. I think, Professor Nix 427 said slowly, their translator struggling to convey their mix of emotions, we may need to revise our classification of Earth as a death world. Perhaps we should consider it a quantum nexus instead, with cats as its guardians. As students and teachers began cleaning up the aftermath of our eventful Bring Your Pet to School day, I noticed something odd about Captain Whiskers' shadow. For just a moment, it seemed to split into multiple versions of itself, each one moving slightly differently, before settling back into a single form. Alex caught my look of confusion and smiled. You know what they say about cats, they exist in a perpetual state of being simultaneously awake and asleep, interested and indifferent, here and there. Turns out that might be more literal than anyone suspected. Captain Whiskers just yawned and curled up for a nap, looking for all the world like an ordinary house cat. But now we all knew better. The next time someone mentioned Earth's dangerous wildlife, I would think not of its predators' teeth or claws, but of the subtle ways its creatures had learned to bend reality itself. And somewhere in the Academy's database, a new entry was being added to the Earth species catalog, Felis Catus status, Quantum Guardian. Threat level, reality altering. Warning, approach with treats and respect. In the days following what became known as the Quantum Cat incident, the Academy buzzed with a different kind of energy. The halls that had nearly been torn apart by gravitational chaos were now filled with students eagerly discussing Earth's pets, particularly the mysterious capabilities of ordinary house cats. Even the quantum bubbles, which had been returned to their Methelian owners, seemed more lively than before, as if their brief interaction with Captain Whiskers had changed them somehow. Professor Nix 427 had turned the entire event into an impromptu research project. Their latest xenobiology lecture was standing room only, with students from all departments crowding in to hear their findings. The implications are extraordinary, they explained, their sensor arrays dancing with excitement. We've been studying Earth's heightened gravity for centuries, trying to understand why such a small planet has such strong gravitational effects. The answer was literally curled up in our laps the whole time. Alex and I sat in the back of the lecture hall, watching Captain Whiskers doze on a floating cushion. The quantum bubbles that had survived the incident would occasionally drift by to check on her, creating tiny ripples in reality that made her whiskers twitch in her sleep. You know, I said, my bioluminescent spots pulsing thoughtfully, there's still one thing I don't understand. How did you know Captain Whiskers could handle the quantum manipulation? Was it just luck? Alex scratched behind their pet's ears, earning a soft purr that made nearby quantum measuring devices flutter. Not exactly. Remember when I mentioned we spent time on the International Space Station? Well, we noticed something odd happening with the quantum communication equipment whenever she was nearby. The signals would get clearer, more stable. At first, the engineers thought it was just a coincidence. But it wasn't, I guessed, watching as Captain Whiskers stretched and momentarily split into 3 perfect copies of herself before settling back into a single form. Looking back, there were so many clues, Alex continued. The way cats always land on their feet, seemingly defying physics. How they can squeeze through impossibly small spaces. The way they sometimes stare at nothing for hours, turns out they might be watching quantum probability waves that we can't even see. The Academy's AI had been upgraded with new protocols specifically designed to work with Earth's quantum-sensitive pets. The security drones now gave Captain Whiskers a wide berth, their sensors acknowledging her as an auxiliary system maintainer rather than just another student's pet. As for the attempted theft of the quantum research data, the investigation revealed a deeper conspiracy. The sabotage drone had been part of a broader attempt to understand Earth's unique quantum characteristics. Several other research stations had reported similar infiltration attempts, all coinciding with events that would have drawn attention away from security systems. The funny thing is, Professor Nix 427 told us after class, whoever was behind this didn't realize they were trying to steal something that Earth's cats have been doing naturally for millennia. All our advanced quantum technology research, and we got outperformed by a pet who spends most of her time sleeping in sunbeams. The Methelian students had become Captain Whisker's biggest fans. They would bring their quantum bubbles to study sessions, watching in fascination as she played with them, each interaction teaching us more about the fundamental nature of reality. The crystalline students discovered that their resonance frequencies could synchronize with her purring, creating harmonic patterns that could stabilize quantum fluctuations across entire rooms. Even the Academy's administration had to adapt. The official student handbook was updated with a new section, Earth Pet Protocols, Quantum Considerations and Safety Guidelines. Though most of us suspected that trying to create safety guidelines for creatures that could manipulate probability itself was a bit like trying to herd cats literally. You know what the best part is? Alex said one day, as we watched Captain Whiskers teaching a group of quantum bubbles how to exist in multiple states simultaneously. This finally explains why cats always act like they know something we don't. They actually do. The Plutonian shadow hounds and Martian dust devils that had been part of the original Pet Day chaos had developed an odd sort of respect for Captain Whiskers. They would bow their heads slightly whenever she passed, acknowledging her as something more than just another Earth pet. Even the Academy's resident Centaurian mood moss had started changing colors and patterns that matched her quantum field fluctuations. As the semester drew to a close, the Academy prepared for its annual science exhibition. This year's theme, unsurprisingly, was quantum interactions in natural systems. Captain Whiskers had been given a special mention in the program, though she seemed more interested in the anti-gravity mice that the engineering department had created as part of their display. "I've been thinking," I said to Alex as we helped set up the exhibition. "Maybe this is why Earth has survived everything your planet has thrown at it. It's not just about being tough or adaptable. You had quantum guardians watching over you the whole time, keeping reality itself stable enough for life to flourish." Alex looked at Captain Whiskers, who was currently existing in 5 different places at once as she chased an anti-gravity mouse through a maze of quantum probability waves. Maybe. Or maybe they just liked the way we scratched behind their ears. The Academy's AI had started keeping a log of what it called catastrophic quantum events, moments when reality seemed to bend just a little too far before snapping back into place. Most of these events, curiously enough, coincided with the exact times when Captain Whiskers would get her evening treats. As I finished writing this account in my xenobiology journal, Captain Whiskers jumped onto my desk, walking across my holographic keyboard as cats have done with human writing implements for thousands of years. She sat down right in the middle of my work, as if to remind me that no matter how much we learned about their quantum abilities, cats would always be cats. The quantum bubbles that now permanently orbited her like tiny planets gave off a soft glow, their light refracting through her fur in ways that seemed to hint at deeper mysteries still waiting to be discovered. She yawned, and for a moment I swore I could see the strings of reality themselves vibrating in harmony with her contentment. Professor Nix 427's latest research paper, Quantum Feline Theory, A New Understanding of Universal Constants, had become the most downloaded article in the Galactic Scientific Database. Its conclusions simply read, "Perhaps the ancient Egyptians were more scientifically accurate than we realized when they portrayed their cat goddess Batat as a guardian of both the physical and spiritual realms." In light of our recent discoveries, we must ask ourselves, who really domesticated whom? As the artificial sun set outside the Academy's windows, casting long shadows that occasionally moved in ways shadows shouldn't, I realized that the universe was both simpler and more complex than we had imagined. And somewhere on Earth, millions of cats were going about their daily routines of sleeping, playing, and keeping reality itself from unraveling, all while making it look effortlessly graceful. The next Bring Your Pet to School Day was already being planned, with new safety protocols and quantum containment fields in place. Though everyone knew that such precautions were probably pointless. After all, how do you prepare for pets that can walk through probability itself? Captain Whiskers just purred, her quantum field rippling with contentment, reminding us all that sometimes the most extraordinary guardians of the universe come in the most ordinary packages. And if you're ever lucky enough to have a cat choose you as their human, remember, you're not just adopting a pet, you're being entrusted with a keeper of reality itself. Though, as Alex always says, they'd probably still knock your coffee cup off the table, quantum powers and all. Because some things, even in a universe full of impossible physics and reality-bending felines, never change.